Yo, everybody, welcome back to the Pixelists, the podcast about all the nerdy things we enjoy, and hopefully you do too. I'm Will, that's Blake, and today we're here to talk about some Critical Role, and I'm going to keep this little intro short and sweet because we're on a slight time crunch, so how you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm really good, and I hope everyone watching is doing good as well, and I feel like I'm always apologizing. This episode's coming out so late.
Don't
and
do
I
it.
All right. Life be crazy.
Life happens. But you know what?
Yeah.
We made it in time again before the new episode comes out. So I'm counting that as a big fat W. More from us to come in the future. Like I said, going to keep this short and sweet. What was just announced right before we went live, basically, is Exandria Unlimited Calamity. And I don't know if you have you had a chance to check it out yet or not.
I saw the tweet. I haven't watched the YouTube video. And then I saw the cast listing.
Yeah, so just super excited about that. I'm sure you guys are too if you're watching this video. But yeah.
Bro, I got some Halo Reach vibes from this.
Ooh.
Did you ever play Reach?
I didn't, but I'm like vaguely familiar with the story.
Basically everyone dies. So
I mean,
that's
seemingly
kind of, I don't know.
You know, it's seemingly maybe the same here. It's just gonna be super interesting to get a peek at one of these like fundamental events in the history of Exandria, and plus Brennan DMing, very excited about that.
Yeah. And I think Abria is a player, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Fun stuff.
So super excited about that. I'm sure we'll talk about it more down the road. But
it does look like they are rolling out multiple stories in the Exandria world, which we called that, as did anyone who invested. It's pretty obvious to everyone, Exandria Unlimited, but we're claiming
gonna take
it here. Yeah, we're going to claim it. We said it first. So, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's great to get another story in the Exandria world, man.
Yeah.
So my wife and I are finishing up EXU, Kaimal, and that's been amazing. So I'm excited to wrap that up and then talk about it here as well.
Yeah, me too. But I guess without further ado, let's jump into this. And if this is your first time with us, what we do is we like to do a recap of each episode before we dive into properly discussing it, theory crafting and everything. So we cut that recap out of our typical podcast and we rehost that just as a recap. So if you find yourself on that video, thanks for checking us out. And if you're interested in the full discussion, we will link that below. But yeah, do you want to get us started today, my friend, with episode 22 of Critical Role?
Yeah. So what happened on episode 22 of campaign 3 of Critical Role? This episode was called Promise and Potential. And the party's basically making their way back to Jassar from the adventure in the Heartmoor in basically robbing the esteemed Hydroga and some of the important documents that they've stolen from him as well. So the party makes it back to Jassar, and they decide to they have a couple things in mind. They're thinking, first of all, we're exhausted. We've been traveling. We need to get some sleep. So they decide to head to the Spire by Fire and kind of lavish themselves a little bit. So they get a couple of rooms. Chetney, they kind of joke with Chetney. I'm like, are you getting a separate room again? And he's like, no, I'm not. He's like, just get 2 rooms. So they get a couple rooms. I'm pretty sure they have drinks and food delivered to their room also, if I remember correctly. And the party basically, they just kind of enjoy some much needed rest after this kind of crazy adventure that they've just been on. And what's interesting is that night, Ashton has some memories, some dreams of really the heist that we've originally been clued into, of whenever him and the nobodies broke into Gianna Hexham's estate. And it's very unsettling. It's not necessarily new information, but he's having these images and kind of, because they're about to go see her and visit her in the morning, and he's really just remembering, that all happened to me. That was kind of traumatic, but I haven't really thought much about it, I guess. And actually, this is going to be a running theme, actually. Once they get to Gianna's place, he's going to remember some things, which we'll get into in a second. But party wakes up in the morning. They head to Hexham's estate. And Ashton also there's quite a bit of time spent in this first half on really kind of coaching the party on how to interact with her, and is being a bit not so much in the sense of like don't offend her, but in terms of like, hey, this person's a bit more dangerous than maybe you've realized. And so he's like, absolutely do not steal from her, Fern. And Fern's like, oh, I just borrow things long term. And he's like, seriously, do not steal from her. And if you do, just don't get caught. And he also mentions that, some people are genuinely nice. And then other people, they basically play nice. It's more of like I don't know if like a political tool is the right way to phrase it, but it's basically like, not that she's being disingenuous, but just know that if she's being kind, she's being very intentionally kind, and you don't want to do something that gives her a reason not to be. So, like I said, pretty much coaches the party on how to interact with her. The party goes to her estate. They enter in, and it's kind of like a bit of a mysterious place, not well lit, but they hear this violin music playing from the second floor. And I think there was a joke in there, maybe from Laudna or someone who's like, beware these sentient instruments that are, playing in the hall. But there were no like self-playing instruments. They actually go up to the second floor to see Hexham playing the violin, and she's playing this piece and totally ignores the party, by the way. I mean, she's really purposely focused on this piece. And there's also this older woman who's kind of watching and listening, and it's a beautifully played piece, and it's quiet as they wait. And then finally, as the song ends, this woman approaches Hexham and basically says, well done. Here's your homework for our next lesson, and gives her a couple more pieces. That person leaves. I think it's Fern, I believe, who's like, hey, do you give lessons? And she's like, yeah, speak to Hexham for my business information. And I think her name was Dinah or Dina. I can't quite remember, but
I think so.
Hexham basically says that that was a renowned, celebrated musician in Dressar who's now retired and is giving her private lessons on the violin. And that really in the last year is when she kind of picked up the violin. And I think F.C.G makes a comment around the effect of like, yeah, you're getting pretty good at that. And she makes kind of a semi-curious remark on like how she can really likes to focus in on things. I'm not even phrasing it right, but kind of is a bit of an unsettling response that you're like, okay, cool. You're very intense. Well, so she's immediately like, okay, give me the good news. I know you were successful. What happened? And the party immediately shows her the stack of papers that, if you recall, revealed that much of Hydroga's museum were fakes. So she loves reading through that. She's like, oh yes, our circles will have so much fun with this. And the party also, they don't do it necessarily in front of her, but they've also, even in thinking about their trip, sort of joke and talk about getting like a card for the verdict, the other group, and like maybe buying them some flowers and like, sorry, we set you on fire, like stuff like that. But and I actually did forget that when they were at the inn, as they were reflecting, Orm shares a little bit about what he knows about the spiraling shin and the grim verity as well. So that's another small detail. But anyway, the party, they're talking to Hexham, and she's like, well, you've done what I've asked you to. Here's your 3,500 gold, and here's also on top of it a satchel of rubies and gems worth about 1,000 gold. And she's basically like, well done. And Fern basically is like, oh, don't forget the statue that I told you I wanted down in the entryway of the estate. And Hexham, she sort of says it half seriously, or it seems half serious. And Hexham's like, yeah, in fact, if you can take it out with you, you can have it. So she's like, okay, great. So their party's actually leaving to go do that. And Ashton basically asks like, hey, we're square now, right? Like we're totally covered. And Hexham sort of hesitantly is basically like, I have so much more work I could give you guys. But yeah, all things considered, we're square. Deal's done. And so she sort of frees Ashton from his jobs with her. But she has one request. She does ask if she could have a moment alone with F.C.G, which, remember, if you've been watching all the episodes, people are really taken in by F.C.G and curious about him. So Ashton basically says, like, yeah, you can have that conversation with him, with F.C.G, if I can sit in on it. So the party basically leaves, and they spend the rest of that section basically trying to figure out how to lift this statue, which they're doing all sorts of things. They try like magic. They try, asking the statue, like, get up and make yourself lighter. And it's like, it's a statue. But basically back in the private office, Ashton is watching as F.C.G and Hexham are having this conversation where Hexham's basically asking, where did you come from? Who made you? And F.C.G is like, well, Dancer made me. And Hexham's like, I've never heard of a Dancer. And is at one point like actually grabs his head and is like looking at all like the bolts and hinges and making F.C.G very uncomfortable, to the point where F.C.G is like, you probably shouldn't really do that.
Yeah.
If you want, I can teach you how to like, be polite and have conversations. And Hexham's like, are you asking me on a date? And he's like, oh, I don't think I am. But anyway, while this is happening, Ashton's also looking around the office, and he notices, he's remembering moments from the heist from before. And he even notices this crate in the corner of her office that is very similar to a crate that he has an image of from that night that he got injured, which will come up later in the episode. All this to say, Hexham basically has two requests of the F.C.G. First, Hexham asks, hey, if you, or there's two things that happen here. Basically says, hey, if you come across any other automaton like yourself, would you be willing to send them to me? And he's kind of like, maybe, I potentially guess so. It's possible. And Hexham again points out that how rare F.C.G is, and how most automaton do very simple tasks. They're not sentient like F.C.G is. And then F.C.G in return asks, do you know where I could find people like Dancer who build things like me? And she says, well, I don't want to give you necessarily like my confidential sources, but there's people all over. In fact, if you go to any major city, you'll probably find people. So they leave. The party decides to, effectively, they need to go check out Lord Estros and talk to him. But as they're sort of leaving the manor, Ashton goes over to the large statue. He rolls a 23 for strength and literally just like picks it up. And like there's no issue whatsoever. So they get on the gondola to head back toward Esteros's manor. Ashton's definitely, he's having these memories of the heist, and he's visibly upset about it. And F.C.G and Imogen offer, hey, if you want, we could detect thoughts and do a little mind meld. And kind of see what happened there. He flips a coin. He's like, all right, screw it. Let's do it. But maybe later tonight, like when the day's over, rather than like right this second. So they agree to that. And then they also talk to F.C.G some more about like, man, people really like you. Like they're really taken by you. And they all kind of throw out ideas for what could be happening there. Laudna, I'm mentioning this because I've said it here in case it happens. Laudna says, maybe you are a dead person, like a soul who's been inserted into this automaton body. And F.C.G kind of nervously laughs. But F.C.G basically says, yeah, my memory only goes back about 3 or 4 years. That's when I kind of like woke up, and Dancer worked on me little by little until I became, a full functioning part of the troop, until they were all like totally murdered and obliterated. And also mentions that they were hired by I think it was the Raya family.
Yeah, I think so.
And the same family had paid Ashton to sort of figure out where did our group go. Right. So anyway, they head to Esteros's manor. They walk in on him basically having like a training session. He's like, doing a physical workout with like a target dummy, I guess.
He's so cool.
Yeah, he's so cool. And he, I think it was like his cane like doubled as like a weapon of some kind.
Yeah,
or he
I
had
think
like
so.
a scythe or something. It was really cool. But they're like, hey, we were ready to tell you about all the crazy stuff that happened. And he's like, oh, well, I have some things to tell you about as well. Ooh. And that's where we go to break. So you want to take it from there?
Yeah. So I'll pick up there, and we come back from break, obviously. And we basically pick up with Estros and the party filling each other in on what's happened in the absence between them. So the first thing Estros says is that, Lady Emoth, whom they captured, they got all this testimony out of her that basically pinpointed Armand Tresci as a conspirator. And because of that, he has gone on the run. And if you recall, the party's efforts at the ball to get this like tracking device on him was the whole purpose of them going. Estros has been using that to track him, and up until I think a couple days ago, he'd been moving around, but now he has left the city. And through another source of Estros's, he found out that the rumor is he is heading to Basuras. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Basuras, which is, I think, where the Paragon's Call is headquartered as well. So apparently he is like ducked off, tail between his legs to go regroup there. And which it's a pretty far away. So Estros is like, if you're interested in, pursuing this, you can use my airship. It's back in port, and it can get you there. And he lets him know that the airship has actually returned from its previous journey of ferrying Bertrand's body to Whitestone. And excuse me, he tells them that, and actually hands them a letter which came with, not with the body because they left the body, but it came with the return trip. And so he hands it to the party, and they basically elect Imogen to read it because, as it turns out, the letter is from Vexalia, who was, Laura's character.
Vexalia de Rollo, by the way.
That's right. Spoilers.
Yeah, what's up with that?
So she does her best Vexalia impression and reads the letter. It's a really cool moment. But essentially just, thanks Bell's Hells for taking care of it, and, but had really actually a lot of kind words about Bertrand. And of course was signed Lady Vexalia. So they think that's really cool. And Orum's like, you sound just like her, and everyone in the cast is like, oh, like you knew Lady Vexalia? And he's like, no, I was just in the room sometimes when she was there. So they have that little moment, and then Estros basically hands them a new map, which is a large map of basically like the whole Hellcatch Valley and Basuras. Am I saying that right? Basuras? Yeah. Area. And so they are, super excited, and Matt actually physically hands them a map as well. So they're really giddy about looking at that. And Estros points out like these different subterranean tunnels that are on the map. He says they're like sinkholes that lead to this subterranean like webbing. And that's one of the reasons it's called the Hungry Valley, is because, people get sunk up in there.
There were a couple of really cool landmarks on the map.
Yeah, there was like the Troll Ferry, I think, was one of them, and just a lot of really interesting, cool things. I haven't looked yet, but I'm wondering if anybody, not to get off subject here, but like tweeted out an HD picture of it yet, because I really want to like take a good look at it myself.
Yeah.
But anyway, he hands him the map, and he's basically like, if you want to be a part of this, go get him, bring him back here so he can face justice. And they're like, well, what if we kill him? And he's like, well, bring the body back. And I think F.C.G. asks about the Green Seekers. They're like, are they involved in this? Are they headed there? And Estros says he hasn't really spoken to them, so he's not really sure where they are in the grand scheme of things, but that almost certainly they are still on this investigation. So perhaps they're headed there, perhaps they're there. He's not sure. Estros then gives them the tracker for Armand so that if they do make it there, they can use it to hopefully find him. He says it's got a couple mile range, and if he is in range, a light will basically point toward the direction you need to go to get to where he is. And he also reveals that it's been about a week since he lost the signal on this tracking device. So then he gives them a quick history lesson on the area in the Hellcatch Valley that they're going to, and he says there's a lot of different factions there that think they're in charge. The military keeps kind of a loose rule, and it's basically really shady. Like if you see somebody that looks shady, they probably are, so keep an eye out. And F.C.G. chimes in and recalls that they were actually made in Basuras, and that the attack on his family, for lack of a better word, basically happened in that area of the world.
Right.
So finally the party is like, they all caught each other up on the information, and they are going to take him up on this. They're going to use the airships. They're like, okay, let's make our final arrangements before we head out. And one last thing they ask of Estros, though, is like, will you make us some baked goods for the journey? And he's like, Evelyn, go to the market. For tonight we bake.
Yeah, get my tools.
So They part ways, and next up, they are going to go to the Dial Hall, which is because of Chetney, who wants to speak with Ajit Dial, who Gurge pointed him in that direction. So they head there, and this is basically like a really cool, like, university type feel. There's lots of like kids studying and lectures happening. Very studious environment. So they walk in, and there's a couple of guards, and Chetney approaches and like, I'm here to speak to Mr. Dial, and he basically rolls terribly, and the guard just essentially ignores him. He's like, okay, cool, buddy. So then Imogen steps up, and she tries and mentions, hey, we're here because Headmaster Grease, told us to come talk to him, and she rolls well enough that the guard does go and get Ajit. So he arrives, they do their introductions, and they say they work for Estros, and he's kind of caught off guard by this, be like, oh, really? Like he's not like off put by it, but he's like, I thought he was a loner. So the party was like, should we not have said that?
Yeah, right.
But then they're like, you mind if we actually speak in private? And so they go to his office, and basically Chetney explains his connection to Gurge, and that he too shares the same affliction that Gurge has, and that he's basically here to find out more about the gorginai. And Ajit explains that, yeah, he met Gurge because Gurge and the gorginai saved him and his wife from this jungle monster that attacked them, and they've basically been friends ever since. They kind of had this relationship where Ajit would help them get different supplies they may have needed and couldn't get a hold of themselves, since they kind of live out of society. But eventually Gurge, split from the group, which we knew that. And yeah, that he hasn't really talked much to him since. But Chetney's like, great, yeah, could you possibly get me an introduction with the gorginai, because I'm trying to learn more about my affliction, yada, yada, yada. And Ajit's like, there are cures. We could cure you if that's what you're looking for.
Right.
And Chetney's like, no, like, I'm not.
Travis like, no way. After all this time, no.
No. I still am like, he made something about like, I want to understand my own existence first,
it's important or something. Yeah, know who you are before. Something like that.
So he says that doesn't interest him now, but he still wants to meet them because they are like the one group that seemingly has somewhat of a control over their affliction, because werewolves are known to like lose control, kill people, attack, eat indiscriminately, except for the gorginai. They seem to, like I said, have some measure of control, so that's why he's interested. And while they're talking about losing control and stuff, the party is like, Chet, have you ever lost control? Like, have you ever had one of these moments? And he says, no, of course not. But with a little pushing, they're like, there are some times when maybe like I don't remember what happened, and they do a little bit later, but bring up how he attacked Orem when they were doing the museum heist. And basically they boil it down to, he was in danger, his health was really low, and the beast takes over in those instances. So the group's like, all right, noted. Let's watch out for that, see if we can figure out some stuff from it. But back to the main discussion, the gorginai. Ajit basically tells them that they've moved to the place called the Gloom Jungles because they didn't really fare too well in the open desert area. So they've gone there, and the best way to probably get in touch with them, and this is at least what Gurge did, was he left the city, would go out into the wilderness where they were, and just howl as loud as he could at the moon, like when the moon touched the mountains or something like that. And then they would come and find you. But he's like, but be wary, because other things are in the jungle and might hear you howl, so hopefully the gorginai get to you first. But that's your best bet for finding them. So he thanks them for all the information, and they do briefly ask him about Ruidus and Ruidus-born people, since he's like a scholarly guy. And Ajit is familiar with the superstitions, but he basically thinks they're just that, superstitions, and like excuses, like instead of taking responsibility, just being like, oh, it was the moon's fault, I was born under the moon. So he thinks it's kind of hogwash in that way.
Yeah.
But so everyone really likes him, by the way. They even do an insight check. They're like, man, I hope he's not like secretly a douchebag. But everyone likes him, and they basically conclude their business there.
There was an insight check where he basically says, and if you come across them, just let me know like how they're doing. And they do an insight check, and they get a whisper. I can't remember who does the insight check, but he gets a whisper about like, that was interesting. And so we don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I think it was Laura. And then
Okay.
we don't know what happened, so who
Yeah.
knows? But I feel like she laughed. So in my mind, I feel like Matt just like was like lying and is like he's super evil.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe it was the truth. But yeah, there was
He's
an
the big
insight
bad.
check. Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
No,
Continue.
you're
Sorry.
good. So then they leave there, and the next stop is they're going to head back to the Trove of Marwa to do a little bit of shopping, but not before Laudna remembers to pick up a croissant to bring her because of their little thing they did last time.
Yeah.
So they get there. It is revealed that Marwa has a little pet rat named Jay, which, of course, Laudna was very excited about. They basically ask her what new magical items she has. And just a quick rundown here. She shows them a magical horn that if you blow, only the target can hear it. They've got a murder apron, which is like this butcher's bib that constantly bleeds. And it basically improves your slashing damage. I think you crit on a 19, and it never stops bleeding.
I think it let you like re-roll. Did it let you re-roll or something?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
I think you could re-roll like your damage, and you had to take the second one.
Second
It wasn't like advantage necessarily.
Yeah, really strong item.
Yeah,
really
super cool too, like just thematically.
Yeah.
And then she also presents them a portable hull, which if you're not familiar in D&D, it's basically kind of like a bag of holding, sort of. It's basically like an interdimensional pocket that they can carry around with them. Fern actually jumps in it, and they find out I think it's about 10 feet deep. And they, of course, are like, we have to get this. So they do a little bargaining with her and basically buy everything that I just mentioned. In addition to that, they get a couple of potions and some spell components. And
F.C.G's never-ending list of random things that he needs. And
got 100 pounds of silver or something.
Yeah.
So they get all of that and, say their goodbyes. And next up is Zudana's house really quickly just to check on her. And Imogen and Laudna give her some gold, just make sure she's still breathing. And then they head on over to the Crook house. And when they get there, Milo is asked to make a propeller for F.C.G for various purposes. So Milo gets on that. And while there, Ashton basically just asks Milo about the original job that he'd been thinking about all during this episode. And Milo says that, we were hired, and I think it was just a vengeful smash and grab. And Ashton does an insight check on that, and he gets a whisper. And I think we're basically later told, so we're not told this in this moment, but Milo too is kind of having a hazy time remembering the events of this.
There's something weird about it. Yeah,
he's got like some holes in. They have some holes in their memory. And more information that is given here is Milo says that they were called Jito. I have it written down and I can't remember how it's pronounced, but was heading the job. And they were after something that Milo didn't know about. Milo says it feels fuzzy and something hit them with a wave and everything became almost like a dream briefly. And then they just ran. They didn't realize Ashton was left behind at first. They came back, did the best they could. And, here we have Ashton today. But Ashton was also, Milo says, gripping this vial in like a death grip. And, Milo actually used the vial as he was just trying everything they could to fix Ashton.
I like how nonchalantly I'd be like, "Yo, what you?"
Wait, what did you put in me?
Yeah.
But so Milo gives the propeller, gets that done, and they basically leave the Crook house. After that, they stop at the Soot and Swill for a quick meal, and then they head back to the Spire by Fire, and this is where F.C.G and Imogen decide to cast Mind Meld on Ashton to try to figure out what happened that night. So this sequence was really cool in the episode. Matt was just basically explaining these like flashes and fragments of memories that they saw as they were diving in, detecting thoughts into Ashton. And so basically it went like this. The first thing they get is this someone saying the shipments are timed, this is our only chance. And then there's a flash to just like running through the streets, and then there's a flash to a room that has these runes that all of a sudden illuminate and the instinct to run. Then there's a flash of a crate hidden off to the side, a flash to Ashton opening it with a crowbar. A woman's voice asks if they found it. Ashton reaches inside. There's like glass clinking around, and they pull out a singular glass vial of this like gray liquid, and then the runes begin to glow. Flash, and the next thing Ashton knows is that they are like flying off backwards on the balcony, just like seeing the night stars and the balcony ahead of them falling, and then darkness. The next flash, someone's yelling, "He's dead, leave him." Next flash, more running. Next flash, blurry vision, then a light, then a dark shape in the light, and then Milo coming into focus, being like, "You okay?" Like, "Oh my god, you're back." And then it ends. And they like stop the mind meld spell. So then they basically ask like, "Ashton, are you okay?" Like, and Ashton's currently under calm emotions from F.C.G, but F.C.G drops it, and Ashton immediately begins like pounding the wall, and very upset. Clearly, he says he recognizes the woman that was in the vision. It was Sally, one of the members of the Nobodies. And he's just like, some of this information was new to him. He hadn't recalled these things, and he just realizes there's a lot we don't know here. Milo also had holes in their memory. Like, I'm gonna have to go find the Nobodies and talk to them and figure out what's going on here. So the party winds down for bed after that, and one last thing that happens is Orym takes out the sending stone and contacts Dorian, and he basically tells them what they're doing, where they're headed, and that they miss him. And Dorian responds in kind, is like, "Miss you too. I have a crazy story, but I'll tell you later." And that's where the episode ends. Whew.
That is what happened in episode 22 of campaign 3 of Critical Role.
Jam-packed, man.
Yeah, it was a long episode. It was almost 5 hours.
5 hours.
Yeah, which I'm all about. I'm all about the long D&D sesh. But I know for you and I, it's tough to get it all in one sitting.
Yeah, for sure.
With life and toddlers and kids, and anyway. All right, man.
Oh my.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's get it out the way.
Let's go ahead and say it.
What'd you
think? Great episode. Loved it. I thought it was amazing. Thought Matt's dream sequence at the end, the way he was able to deliver like the half sentences with like the I think like the channel changer, like as it would cut to the next image. Matt just is so gifted. I mean, it's just so incredible.
Good. I don't know if you I texted you when that was happening, and I was like, man, Matt is just so good at this. So I don't know if you saw that text, but that moment is what I was referring to.
Okay, I saw the text, but I just, in general, I feel like we're always just like, Matt Mercer.
Yeah, there was no context for me saying it, so that's why I wanted to fill you in now. Great. But yeah, that was just so good, man. It was like, I was just so enraptured by it. It was, I don't know, it's not to wax poetic on what Critical Role is, but it was like, it might as well been like in an IMAX theater, like watching a sequence. Like, that's how like vivid and like well done it was, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So shout out Matt. I guess he shouldn't, maybe shouldn't quit his day job, but he's pretty good at this.
Yeah, he's all right.
But yeah, so love the episode. We got a lot of like interesting breadcrumbs towards people's backstories. We got some interesting F.C.G stuff. Obviously the Ashton stuff. It's crazy. Chetney. Yeah, of course, Chetney as well. I just can't wait to dive in more. They all, like, almost every single character has like a fascinating kind of, I don't know if mystery is the right word, but like element to them that I'm so excited to explore. So it was cool to get some more on the journey to that in this episode.
Yeah, and it's cool the story points that are being foreshadowed too, like F.C.G being like, "Oh yeah, I was built in Bassaras."
Yeah,
things like that where you're like, "Oh, that's a nice little neat coincidence." So it seems like all these stories are going to continue to intertwine with whatever's happening. Which, hey, they saved Dressar, presumably. It seems like Armand has moved on and has run away. So it seems like, is Armand the big bad, you think, or
of like the whole show?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think he might be like the current big bad of the arc. But I mean, big bad of the show, I'm ready for like a multiversal, interdimensional, ruinous being or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there was no direct mention of like the Shade Mother, but part of me's curious was like, was that dealt with? We didn't really get an update from the Green Seekers, so who knows? But at the very least, we know that Armand was being targeted and he wasn't dealt with because he escaped. But they seem to be on the current corruption. But the question is like, how much was the Nightmare King? Who was puppeting who? Like maybe the
Right.
Nightmare King was the real one that's up to no good, and he may still be up to no good for all we know. Or if it was
Right.
Armand, then maybe it's solved. Um, I
Yeah,
was,
I almost kind of have the impression that there are some threads that are dormant and that won't be lifted back up. Like the Shande Quorum, for example, there was a lot of conversation around their identities, the morality of that group, in terms of the decision making they were deciding. But even specifically the Ivory
the Ivory Syndicate.
Syndicate. Yeah, is it Syndicate?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and how they were possibly even working collaboratively with the Shande Quorum.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely curious if when these things will come back up again. But yeah, it seems like their sights are set on Armand as sort of the central figure of all the shenanigans that have been happening in Dressar.
Yeah, and I feel like those plot points that you just mentioned, it maybe will just they won't be like fully head on addressed, but maybe like in the group communicating with Estros be it in person or through magical means. Maybe we get little like breadcrumbs of what the machinations of Drusar are looking like. But to me, it seems like when we leave here to go to Bosseros, might not be coming back for a while. Because
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of comments. I mean, Estros basically said, "I need my airship back within the month."
yeah,
And then as they kind of said goodbye to Milo, Ashton's like, "Yeah, we're going to be gone for a while. Look out for yourself." Yeah, it definitely feels that way.
so to me it would be, I still want to like get little pieces of what's happening there, but I feel like as far as like direct plot threads that the party's following, maybe a lot of them are going to be, if not completely left for a while. But I mean, we say that, who knows what an Armand encounter could lead to? Maybe they're forced to go back to deal with whatever he had set up there, or who knows. And I wonder what the Paragon's call is, what their role is going to be in all of this, because the machinations were clearly to try to get them to come in.
Right.
He's been found out. Have they been found out? Are they still like what?
Yeah.
I wonder what they wanted from that. Were they just being paid and they did what Armand told
Yeah,
them, or
I think it was like the power grab that we kind of picked up on, and I mean they picked up on. But yeah, Estros mentioned not only had Armand retreated to Bosseros, but that he had some line that was basically the initiative to bring the Paragon's call in has been totally suspended.
okay?
So yeah, they've been, their job application has been
Denied.
denied. Yeah,
Huh.
so they've presumably retreated with him, and they can't be happy about it.
Yeah,
So
like I don't know. I mean, Drusar seems like a very large, powerful city, for lack of a better word. We don't know how powerful Paragon's Call is, but I'm wondering if they are within the realm of trying to like have a coup
yeah, take it by
without
force.
the blessing. Yeah, like just be
Yeah,
like, okay, well, you didn't do it this way. Now we're doing it the hard way.
I could totally see that. Yeah, like a returning to Boss Ross to kind of regroup, and then I guess the question is how involved is like the majority of Marquette, like would Oncarel allow that to happen? They
Yeah.
kind of let everyone fend for themselves. But I think you're thinking about something that I agree could definitely happen.
Yeah. So I mean, it'd be interesting to see, and hopefully, I mean, assuming we will, because that's where they're headed. But I mean, they may never find Armand. They may get there and he might be gone. He might be dead.
They just find his hand in the sinkhole.
Oh Lord,
and he's gone.
The Hungry Valley or whatever it's called.
Right.
But yeah, so leaving Drusar. Don't think we're coming back soon. They do have to bring the airship back in a month. Well, they don't have to. I guess they could just send it back. But they did mention, I think, that if they finished this within that month time frame, they might use it to go to EOS.
Yep, that's right.
So, and this is just, I'm circling back around on this long tangent, but I feel like Drusar is going to be in the rearview mirror for a minute. So I'm kind of excited to see everywhere else we explore. I mean, Bossaros itself and EOS both sound really cool, especially Bossaros, if that's where F.C.G was made. That's super interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, I feel like it would make more sense if he was made in EOS, because that seems kind of like a studious, like forward thinking, like place where cool stuff would get made, whereas Bossaros is like this in the valley, like there's no law. So
that's about what I got from it.
Like, you know, Mad Max.
Yeah. That's actually, no, I think that's a great way to, describe it. I definitely got kind of a Mad Max, like every man for themselves kind of vibe. So yeah, it is interesting that something like F.C.G would come out of Bossaros as opposed to EOS.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I'm basically really interested in everyone's mystery, but F.C.G is one of the more enticing ones, just to figure out, you know, what is he? Is he, you know, the dead guy in a robot's body? Is he in an Aormaton from long ago that was refurbished? Like, what killed his friends and family? So any groundwork we make up there, I'm really excited for.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier, I really like everyone's story. I think I'd be hard pressed to imagine each person having the size of like story reveal as we got with Laudna and the Sun Tree. Not that it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility, but I guess what I'm saying is I'm prepping myself for it to either be something like, you are this dead person whose soul's been, here's all the stuff with that, and it's like, what? But I'm also prepping myself to, it's even like a little less sexy than that, and there's a little bit more like a humble beginnings type deal. I'm just excited to dig in. I mean, it's cool. Yeah. I've said this before, but I mean, I really enjoy every character. And my buddy started watching actually from my D&D campaign.
Oh yeah,
he's on like episode 3, and I was like, "So, what do you think of the characters?" He's like, "Dude, I like all of them. They're really great."
Yeah,
I was like, "Yeah, they really are."
Nice. Is he hooked yet, or still on the fence?
He didn't know about it, but we play D&D every other week, and I was like, "Yeah, man, if you really like," and he really enjoys it. He's like talking to me about how he's always like on Instagram and stuff like that, reading about D&D, and I was like, I mean, you definitely got to check out Critical Role then. And he was like, yeah, like my wife and I, it's really cool. And then he was like, I got to do a better job on our D&D sessions. I was like, well, they're professionals, so it's okay. But you were on your phone that entire session.
You will lose 2 hit dice.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. I love it when somebody new discovers it and can, listen to me talk about it and understand now, because I like to tell people. Anyway, let me not get off subject here. So there's one big thing I want to talk about, but before we move to that, the Ashton stuff, basically, because I feel like that's basically the juiciest thing that we have here. But before we move to that, was there anything else in this episode that you in particularly wanted to talk about?
I don't have much to say about it. I really like Marwa as a character.
She's so great.
Yeah, and I just love, they have such a great interaction with her. So just in general, I just really appreciate that shop owner. The other one is Chetney in the Dial Hall. That's the only thing I'd want to talk about.
Right.
Which we can do now, or we can do it after Ashton if you want.
Yeah, let's just knock old Chet out.
Yeah, I just not really much to say about it, other than I just thought it was interesting how I never say it right. Gorginai, how do you say it? Gorginai? You're muted.
Gorginai, I think. Gorginai. I don't know. Now I'm in my head about it, so I'm not sure.
I think it's Gorginai. But IG Dial mentioned that there were people. It basically says like to Chetney, like, hey, you definitely want to meet them sooner or later and get control of this thing because there are people who make a lot of money hunting people like you.
Right.
So that was interesting to me, and maybe just kind of wonder, where could that potentially go?
There was that, and then there was also Chetney saying like I don't know how he phrased it, but like I was basically warned that if I didn't get a hold on this, like someone would come and deal with me.
Right.
Which we've heard of that group before, but in the past I was always confused with like who was the Gorginai and is this another group? But that when he said that, it made me think that okay, that's a separate group from the Gorginai. And do you remember what that was by any chance?
No, but I know what you're talking about, but that even seems more noble than what it seemed
right,
like.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's maybe two groups. There's sort of like this more, we hunt the, in kind of like a Witcher vibe, like the monsters who, are causing mayhem. And then there's separately, there is this group that is
like poachers, basically. Like.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So
I'm getting it from both sides. Must be.
Yeah.
It's hard out there. Yeah.
I did think it was interesting in D&D world that there was a cure for it. It actually makes me wonder why the Gorginai wouldn't collectively be like, yeah, let's just we're living in a gloomy forest. Let's just go ahead and cure this bad boy.
Yeah, so. I mean, maybe they're like Chet and they just, they like it. Like, I'm sure it is. I mean, not to get into like literally analyzing something that's fiction, but I could see it. Like, if you had the ability to transform and get like much stronger and agile, and especially if you're older, like Chet. Well, I don't know if he's actually old for his race, but very attractive in a lot of ways. I could see. So I mean, if you could get the other parts of it under control, then I think I'd be cool with it. Keep your cure.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
But it is definitely interesting. I wish I remembered the name of that group, which it may not. I may be even confusing things, and there is no group, and I just. Like I said, I'm confusing things. But if there is, I really want to know more about them. I really hope we see them. I mean, even if it's in an adversarial fashion, like if for whatever reason they've deemed Chetney to be a hazard and are like hunting him, I still think that would be cool. But it would be cool just to see them in a non-adversarial situation as well.
He's got to check out more about the Gorginai. And then we also know that other douchebag that he hates is probably going to pop up as well. Can't think of his name.
His boss or whatever.
The guy that he, yeah.
What is his name?
I can't remember.
No. Okay. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
He's like, he's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna drive me crazy. Maybe it'll come to me. But yeah, that would actually be really interesting if he would. I mean, I don't think this is the case, but if he were affiliated with either of those two camps,
that
would be interesting.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, so super interested to find out more about the Gorginai and just kind of are they just nomads and they don't like? Are they like Luddites? They don't like civilization. They just prefer being out in the woods, or like what is their deal? And how have they gotten control of this like they have?
Yeah, I think it was Imogen or maybe F.C.G even asked, like, are there people who are part of this organization or just werewolves in general who opt to live their lives in their werewolf form completely
24/7?
Yeah, and I don't remember his answer. Maybe I don't think he gave a definitive answer, but that would be a bit curious if he runs to this group and they all are, full-time werewolves.
Yeah, like that made me think of when in DBZ when Goku and Gohan like stay Super Saiyan all the time to like for the Cell games or whatever to like adjust.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just my little aside. I have nothing else to add there, but yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Oh, Ultgar.
Ultgar,
that was his name. Guy in the chat just reminded me. Thank you, KK.
Nice.
Yeah. Olkar. Yeah. Sorry, I got off track with my DBZ comment and I forgot where I was going.
Such an important reference.
Yeah,
So,
it needed to be made.
well, we can talk about Ashton if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. Crazy. So I'm trying to decide where to even begin. So I guess at the beginning. So there are these crates which we found out about through the Hexham, or not Hexham, the Hydroga's notes
research,
which is like every 3 months or something they show up, and then somebody else comes and picks them up. Seemingly, I think all but 99% confirmed that would be the same crate that Ashton
right
messed with, because we had the voice that said like they're on a schedule, like this is our chance. And the fact that what was inside was a glass vial that made things all weird.
yeah,
And
it's a bunch of glasses in there.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we don't.
Out,
yeah,
he heard glass like kind of rifling around, and then pulled out the vial.
And I guess presumably we don't know what else was in there, but best guess is that it was a lot of those vials.
Could be, yeah, right.
Pulls it out.
Maybe she ordered a flight of vials. Who knows?
Pulls it out, death grip, and it is seemingly the miracle ingredient that allowed him to come back from his injury. And we know that Ashton it's a homebrew class that he and Matt came up with, but has these like elements of chance to it, where he rolls the dice to see which rage he has, etc., etc. All these things and more lead me to believe that this was dunamantic liquid energy, which is, I think we briefly have talked about this when we've postulated what maybe happened that night and what was in the chest. But this dunamancy is a school of magic that was introduced in campaign 2, and it has timey-wimey weird stuff associated with it. And again, this isn't confirmed that that's what that was, but in campaign 2 there was another, again without like giving spoilers, there was this moment where the research was being done, the party kind of finds it, reads through it, and the thing in the museum that was a beacon, and it was fake, but I think we briefly talked about it. Those were basically being studied, a real one, and this liquid was basically extracted from that study that matches a similar description. So seemingly I think that's what that was, and him taking it is probably what has led to his, one, that he's alive, but two, that he has those elements of chance because it's all thematically flavored, like for this dunamantic energy, which I know this is like, that was a lot of word vomit, especially if you're unfamiliar with campaign 2, but I've seen other people say this too, and I feel like I would be really surprised if that's not what it was.
That's a great insight. I mean, I had no idea what it could be, and never saw campaign 2 obviously, but that in my mind checks out. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and just super cool. And not to get on the train of talking about how everyone's backstory is cool again, but there's just so many interesting elements. Like we have Ashton, who's tied to some stuff in campaign 2. We got Laudna, who's tied to, not really tied to stuff in campaign 1, but Imogen, who's freaking got stuff with Ruidus going on, werewolves. It's just like everyone has such little like cool flavor injected in, and in Ashton case, literally, I guess, because he got that juice up in his brain. But
is this something? Would this vial be something like, for lack of a better term, is dunamancy liquid? Is it like a rare prize substance like broomstone, like what was campaign or an EXU that they found in the warehouse?
Oh, that was residuum.
I mean, wasn't that also like a prize, like a rare mineral of some kind?
That's like a powerful like resource spell component. Can use it for like anything basically.
So we have residuum, we have broomstone. Now there's this liquid, and I think I interrupted you. You were saying it is like kind of in that same tier of like super rare, highly sought after.
I would say it's even another level because it's like
oh really? Okay.
It's like new. So like I said, so to give a very brief kind of, and this could all be wrong, and this is like I'm wasting everyone's time. But to give a really quick overview, as spoiler free as possible, campaign 2, there's this thing called a beacon, which again Hydroga had a fake one in his museum. It was one of the whatevers, and it's basically like this religious artifact. And one of the things that it did in campaign 2, again, slight spoilers, but mechanically it allowed for like a reroll, kind of like the luck feat for D&D. You know, if you get a bad roll and you have the lucky feat, you could reroll it. This thing essentially gave you one of those, and it was flavored as a fragment of possibility, like you're staring into the void, and instead of, you know, this streamline of time where you rolled poorly, you're actually going this way where you rolled well, type of thing. So really cool. And these religious artifacts were being studied, and like I mentioned with the research and stuff that the party found, you know, figures that B wanted to use, as they always do, like, how do we turn into a weapon? How do we, you know, do this? And so that's where the vial was extracted, and it's like, we've successfully like liquefied this magic, or whatever you want to call it. So like that didn't even exist basically until campaign 2, and presumably I think that research has continued, possibly in secret. It wasn't supposed to be, and maybe now there's like this black market for selling Dunamanic energy. Now what it's like being marketed as, I don't know. Maybe it's like, hey, live forever, hey, like get a new, you know, it's hard to like translate mechanics to like the real world application of something like that in D&D, but you know, liquid luck or something. But I think it would be, this is a very long-winded answer, but tiers higher than both Residuum and Brimstone, because it's like a new substance that's probably illegal. Not that laws even would exist for it yet, but some next level stuff, basically. Like,
wow.
Which, again, I hate that I'm just all basing this on an assumption, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, great call out.
It explains to me why Gianna was so interested in keeping Ashton around and didn't turn him into the cops. You know, originally we were like, oh, she just, you know, like we didn't know what the reason was, but to this, it makes sense to me. It's like, no, like he has that in his brain. That's what brought him back to life. Let me keep an eye on this. Let's see what's going on with this. I think that, to me, that explains her fascination, for lack of a better word, with Ashton.
Yeah.
And yes, again, sorry for just word vomiting so much, but I'm very interested in what the black market hustle is here for her. To go on another level, try to be quick, of stuff that this stuff does. Like I said, it's a religious artifact, and one of the things that this like culture that was their religion believed, and they didn't just believe it, I mean, it was true, it's a thing that happens, is they would be consecuted, which means their soul, when they die, would go into this beacon, and then it would later, like when a child was born, their soul would go into it. So it was kind of a way to like be immortal in a way. So like that kid would grow up, and when they were like 10 to 12, they would start remembering their past life, and then they would eventually like be that person again.
This is like the theory behind it, or like in campaign 2, there were actually people who that was the case.
There were actually people who that was the case.
So do like both souls live in the cube, or in the person? I mean, or like where does the baby's soul go?
So I think the way it was explained, it wasn't that like they got replaced. It was just that like that always was them again.
Go Tinks. Yeah, fusion. I'm with you.
Yeah, I guess. But I guess that's kind of like a mystery still, I guess, is like, was there original soul that got kicked out, or was it just always?
Yeah. And then the religion, is this like an old god kind of like one of the deities, or is there a certain one in particular? Or
yeah, so it's based on the Luxon, which is, again, if you don't want spoilers, like don't look into it. But it's one of, or if not the oldest entity that basically brought life to Exandria. I guess we don't have confirmation besides Matt just saying that's what it is, which that's, I guess, as the most confirmation you could ever have. But but yeah. So anyway, all that distilled back into what's happening here. It would be super interesting. I don't think this is the case, but because of all of that, it would be really interesting if Ashton is someone else that like their soul was in that liquid, for lack of a better word, again, and you know, that was like consecuted liquid, and now some other entity is in his body. Again, I don't think that's the case, but just the possibility was there, so I wanted to at least throw it into the ether.
Yeah, now it's getting weird.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And that's definitely like a lore dump for sure that I knew nothing about, but makes sense to me. Yes. And if it ends up not being the case, we'll just not mention it again.
Yeah.
And if it is the case, we'll say we've said it since day one.
That's right. That's exactly right. But yeah, so again, all that with the bow on it, whatever. Even if that's not what it is, let's just throw that all away. It's obviously something very powerful and potent if it, you know, brought him back.
And I wonder who Hexham's connected to, because she's the implied middleman in this situation, right? I mean, she holds it temporarily, presumably till it's safe enough to be shipped again, like whatever window she's waiting on. So I wonder what part of organization she's working with.
Yeah, me too. I wonder if she's... Yeah, so again, without getting into spoiler territory, if all that stuff I said was true, there are some like players that were involved with that research and stuff, and so maybe they're still the ones involved, and maybe they're dealing with her. But yeah, I just super curious, how does she fit into this? And I want to know what that stuff does when not just poured into a random person to help them come back to life. So super interested to see.
This person's mortally wounded. Let me go ahead and just throw this in here. So yeah, okay.
A lot of questions, but super cool.
Yeah, let us know in the comments too what you guys think is going on here with the vial, because this was definitely an interesting part of the episode.
Yeah, and you know, just Ashton in general, you know, that cult, was he a part of it, and does that have any relevance to anything in this scenario, or I don't know.
Yeah. I will say, the further we get into the story, the more I get apprehensive on someone dying.
Oh yeah,
because I'm like, oh, their story's getting so good. Like, be safe, guys. So it could happen to you.
I hope not.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to talk about from the episode?
I mean, I think we hit most of it. Definitely the big things for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys for checking out the episode. You can definitely follow us on our Twitter at the Pixelists, and let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. And then we'll be watching tonight. We won't get this episode up. You know, I won't be able to watch the whole episode tonight, but stay tuned for our next episode. And definitely we'll be doing something around Exandria Calamity, as well as we're going to do Doctor Strange 2, right?
I'm down.
Okay.
I'm down.
I think we have some things to say about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What do you want to do for a thumbnail?
I have no idea. You got any ideas?
Maybe something related to the dream sequence, or
yeah.
Maybe one of us could be like, kind of like looking around, like, you know, like shh, you know, and the other person's like, you know, like breaking into something.
Okay.
Which one do you want to be?
I'll be the shh.
Okay. All right. I'll be the break-in.
All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, we got it. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. And it is Thursday. So
it is Thursday.
Enjoy the episode.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
See ya.
See y'all.